Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Grace of a Military Child in Life podcast. Military families are not like your traditional family. They are strong, brave, resilient, and some of the most incredible people I know. My name is Gracie, a U.S. Army BRAT, and I am your host. I am honored to be able to give military family members like myself a place for them to share their stories and experiences in the military life. Stay tuned for this week's guest. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Grace of a Military Child in Life. Today, I'm here with Margaret, who is an Army brat. So, Margaret, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well today. Thank you so much for having me. Really just so grateful to be able to talk about military life.
Yeah, and I should also say you're a military spouse too, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, awesome. So, start by telling us what it was like growing up as a military child.
Yeah, so growing up military was quite the experience for me. I like to say that I am like the standard military brat. Just when you think of military brat, that's kind of the experience I had growing up. So I was born in Fort Lewis, Washington. I know I just dated myself a little bit there since JBLM. But yeah, so I was born in Fort Lewis, and then, within like 6 months, we had moved. I think I moved 10 times before I turned 10.
Oh,
and then, yeah, so my dad was in the military. He was an officer. He ended up going through the Q course and becoming a Green Beret here at Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty.
Right. And everything's changing.
I know. We had moved around quite a bit and actually landed in Germany. And that's where I spent the longest portion of my life. So we moved there in middle school, right when I was headed into middle school. And then, after high school, I came to the United States for college. So that was kind of my military life in a nutshell. There was deployments, to Iraq twice that we dealt with my dad. And he was always in and out, especially during that time as a Green Beret.
Right. Yeah, because that is very much an active lifestyle. Like you have active duty, but then you have like Green Beret active duty, which, takes it to a whole new level of being constantly gone.
Yeah, absolutely. But, when I look back on it, I know it was hard as a kid, but I really have fond memories. Like every move was just such a unique time for me. I'm a social person, so kind of like the opportunity to go meet new people and see new places. My brother and I always kind of like hung out, and I remember playing in the boxes a lot, and that was fun for us. So.
Yeah, and it's fun if you are very much a social person. It is fun to move and meet new people literally everywhere you go. Yeah. And, especially moving overseas and having spent so much time in Germany, you're able to experience a new culture, a whole new group of people, and really immerse yourself into that.
Absolutely. That was definitely one of my favorite parts. And even just kind of understanding like states. I know a lot about state history since I lived in so many of them, and it was like always during that time. But yeah, I loved being a military brat, and I think I learned a lot of really valuable lessons that have helped me in my life today. Yeah,
I don't think, that average person really understands how different each, area of the United States are, each state. And I really got that shock when I moved from Ohio to Texas for the first time. And, we're moving from a Great Lakes, region state to Texas, where it is literally its like own country there. And, being thrown into Texas history, it's like, oh my goodness, like this is a whole new world. So even just within our borders, it is so different.
That's very true. I moved here to North Carolina after living in New York and then DC as an adult. And even from DC to North Carolina, it was just a huge transition. People are a lot more friendly here. And it's like, why are you talking to me at the gas station or the line at the grocery store? But yeah, there's definitely cultures and subcultures within our own country too.
Yeah. And that's the fun part, of just military life as a whole. You get to move around, you get to experience all of that. And I mean, you went on to become a military spouse yourself, but most people kind of figure it out and say, okay, well, I don't like this portion of the United States as much as I like this portion. So I'm going to kind of plant roots here and, you kind of have the experience to kind of travel around and figure it all out. But, many military kids also go on and be spouses too. So, or service members
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of research that says the military is a family business, because
That is true.
I think that military children end up being they're more propense to serve in the military themselves. So if they don't serve, often we have those commonalities with people who do. So I think that's why a lot of us end up as spouses, if not serving ourselves.
Yeah. I haven't heard it said that way, but I love it that it is a family business because if you look, even back generations and generations, I mean, just about every American, I would say, probably has some sort of roots connected to the military community. But if you go back and, you have a parent serving or you're serving, most likely your parents served and their grandparent or their parents served, so your grandparents and great grandparents and, down the lineage.
Yeah, absolutely. And my husband is also a military brat too. So
Oh,
it kind of
wow.
in my life, it even applies there. He saw his dad serve and that inspired him to do the same.
Yeah. And it's so cool that, because especially today we experience like such a high turnover rate in the military and very low recruitment. So it's really cool to see, military brats continuing to live that lifestyle, whether they loved it or hated it in the moment, because it can be a trying lifestyle at some point. But it's really cool to see just almost carrying on that tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. My mom and I always joke that I'm living her life. We've even ended up in the same places. I
Oh,
moved
wow.
to Syracuse, New York as a kid, and then like from North Carolina, and then I also lived in DC, and then as an adult, I've lived in all three of those places too. So it's just kind of funny how things come full circle a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you share a little bit about what it has been like being a military spouse and maybe what the transition from like child to spouse has been like?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it's one like people don't ask a lot. So thank you for that. I think, as a military kid, there's like a lot of transitions that we go through as well. We
Right,
hear a lot about veteran transition, getting out of the military, but I think people don't like recognize that we do that too.
right.
So there's like that transition, but then there's definitely one if you do kind of join the military or become a spouse yourself. And what's so funny is growing up, I I really enjoyed my dad's time in service, but I definitely recognized like the difficult parts of it and how it was hard for my family. It's a challenging lifestyle.
Yes, it
So
is.
yeah, absolutely. And I actually grew up like telling myself I would kind of never marry into the military, something
I
I
think
really wanted
most
to
of
get
us
away from.
do because that's what
Yeah.
I said for the longest time. And I'm like, it might not be the worst idea now.
Isn't that so funny? I was just like, no way, I am not doing that. And then sure
Right.
enough, like fate or whatever you believe in, I just fell in love and here I am. So, but I do think that having grown up in that life, I wouldn't say I knew what I was getting into. I kind of hate that phrase because every piece of military life is different, and like
Right.
every branch and every unit is different. So, but I do think that I had some skills from growing up that help me now. So my husband deploys pretty often. I think we've been through 4 deployments since we've been together already, and he probably will deploy some more. But there's that. And then I think that I've just been maybe a little bit more independent than some other people and able to kind of cope with that a little bit better. I'm really
Right.
comfortable being on my own and just kind of like tackling the day to day life. So I do think it kind of set me up for success in that way. But at the same time, how we were just talking about how military life is so different. His job is one that we actually won't really move very often. So I've kind of been here at Fort Bragg for like 6 years now, and I'm getting antsy. I'm like, oh, it's time to move
I
again.
was gonna say, did you, because like, I mean, you said you moved 10 times by the time you were 10. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
that's a lot. Even for a military kid, that can be a lot. And
yeah.
then, we've been here for a decade, and I think, I'm definitely getting antsy. And, my dad is retired, so we're obviously not moving. But I'm definitely, you start to get antsy around like five or so years.
I feel like 5 years is the hit. It's either like 3 years or 5 years, and then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I'm ready for something new. So
Yeah.
that's funny to hear that you're the same way.
Well, and I hear from military kids even that when say, if they go into adulthood and do not have any ties to the military, as in like, being an active duty service member, or I mean, service member as a whole, reserve even, but being a service member or being a spouse, it's like, okay, a couple years go by, you need to like paint the house again. You need to move some furniture around, make it feel new, just so it's not like you're stuck in the same, four walls.
Yeah, absolutely. I am victim to that. This room I'm in has changed a billion times since I've lived here. And I'm sure it will change over and over again. But I think that's kind of nice too. I feel like as a military kid, you don't often end up like stuck in your ways. You're always finding something new or a new activity. I know a lot of people kind of like move around in jobs even, just to keep increasing their skills and have that like motivation, if you will.
Yeah. And, when we're faced with challenges, it's that whole idea of being resilient and how military kids are so resilient. And it just carries on with them throughout the rest of their lives. And I always say, like, you can pick out really just any military family as a whole from a crowd, but you can easily pick out military kids too, because they just stick out. We're more resilient than the average person. We're willing to take an extra step and try something or go to a new place rather than, we weren't raised in the same four walls that, we were born into, really. So we're, it's easier for us to step outside of our comfort zone sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the skills that you gain growing up in a military family and kind of like just even respect, for just other people in general, that I don't want to get like political, but I'm not sure that everybody has that, kind of same mentality. And I think that gets you really far in life. And I don't think it can be understated, like what you learn as a military kid.
Right. Yeah. Because even still to this day, it's like, yes, sir, no, ma'am, like, carrying on those same things that I learned in the military life, throughout daily life, because that's just, like you said, it's just common respect to others. And then, I think we also have a deeper appreciation for this country and what we've, what it's taken us to get to this point, because we've experienced the loss, we've experienced the heartbreak, that can come from military life, whether that is, in my situation where my dad was injured, or where it's in other situations where you become a Gold Star family, or even just seeing someone that happened to someone, because more than likely, you're going to see it happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. My dad, so I was in middle school when I was heading into middle school when 9/11 happened. And then my dad ended up in the surge in Iraq. And so it's kind of funny because we had just moved to Germany, which is quite a beast in itself to move to a new country.
Yeah.
And then right off the bat, I think within a month, he was gone overseas. But what's kind of interesting about it is that the whole base was gone. There was every family that you knew had at least one parent missing, whether it was their mom or their dad who was serving overseas. And so there was times when people at our school, you'd hear that their parent didn't come home, and we all kind of learned to like not talk about it, because you didn't want to say your dad was coming home or your mom was coming home, and then know your friends still going through that. So it was definitely, you see it a lot. And I do think that if you've grown up in that life, you have that appreciation for those who serve and the country that we have. And it's myself, I'm like really, really grateful knowing the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into it firsthand.
Right. Because especially it's not just the service member who serves, the family serves as well. And we, it's a hard concept to understand until you understand it, that as a military child, you're actively serving as well, or as a spouse, you're actively serving as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, especially just, you know, with deployments and having to adjust to your friends deploying, because once your parent deploys, you have to be a comfort to, or sorry, once their parent deploys, it's like you're having to be a comfort to them, whether
Yeah.
you talk about it or not, you know, in some weird way. And we're not necessarily trained to, you know, be kind of like friends and therapists in a way.
Yeah, but you know, in a way too, like growing up in that environment, I think emotional empathy and just being
Yeah.
able to kind of like see or empathize with what other people are going through. That's definitely a skill I learned. A lot of people say they like feel comfortable talking to me, and I think that was kind of part of it. You know, it was just part of life to talk about those things and support each other. And I think that if you grow up in a military community and you live on base, especially,
Yes.
you just see all the families support each other, and it's just kind of like a really great example for how a community can come together and like during a tough time like that.
Yeah. And that was the greatest thing. You know, we were put into a very unfortunate situation, but that was the greatest thing of being in that situation, being surrounded by those people who were going through a similar situation, or,
Yeah.
you know, not even going through a similar situation, and just being stationed in San Antonio, Texas, and just being aware and um, aware to what's going on and the casualties of war, and, you know, the just the repercussions in general. I will never forget, you know, the days where we'd be driving off post and it's like, oh, there's a helicopter coming in. Like, that is like a heartbreaking moment, because you never know what's going on inside of it.
Yeah.
But you're just so aware to those situations, and you are, like you said, yeah, you empathize more with other people, because you kind of know that they're going through the hard times. And I mean, we all wish we never go through them, but we all know that it could be us next.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And there's a heavy weight to that I don't think a lot of people have experienced in their life. And so I don't know about you, but when I left or high school to go to college, I kind of had like my own transition, like we talked
Yeah,
about, and it was hard to relate to, I guess, normal kids, for lack of a better word, because
right.
I had kind of been living in that life for so long and knew that kind of loss. We also lost my cousin in Iraq. So that was kind of like transformative for me too. And yeah, it was just always a little bit hard to be at a university among people who were not very familiar with military life. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's hard because, I mean, you think about those first week college discussion boards of where are you from? And it's like, okay, I only lived in 3 places growing up, but how do I even pick? Because each stage was a different state, or each, you know, location was a different stage in life, and a different, you know, I learned things from each area. So how do you pick, you know, one place is greater than the other?
Yeah, that's always the $1 million question for me. Now I can say I'm from North Carolina, I think, because I've been here so long as an adult.
Right.
But when I was in college, people would say, "Where are you from?" And at that point, I was basically identifying German because I had lived there most of my life. But, you know, I lived on base, so I didn't really speak fluent German. I was okay
Right.
at it, could get around. But that's always hard to explain too. It's like, what?
It raises a
Um,
lot of questions.
yeah, and then before you know it, it's a simple question, and you're just down a rabbit hole, and people are looking at you like, "What the heck are you talking about?" So, actually, funnily enough, and I think that I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this too, and if you've talked to other
Yeah.
families who ended up in this situation. But I felt so like maybe disconnected from my military community because my parents still lived in Germany too, so I was like
Oh,
on my
wow.
own 100%. In the States. And my
Yeah.
grandparents were not in the same area either. So it was like truly just me. But I ended up hanging out with a student veterans club because I just had nothing in common with anybody else. And they kind of adopted me. And that was really, you know, that first year of college was like really hard for me actually because I had culture shock from like being in Germany and then now being in the
Right.
States. And then
Right.
I had just culture shock and then like being not around military family members. So they took me under their wing, and throughout college, I was part of the Student Veterans Club. I was actually like the secretary and ran their Facebook back in the day.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I will say, I wasn't as connected as that, but I definitely did, any spot that I saw like veteran or student veteran or military, I definitely tried to integrate myself with that. I was
Yeah.
also a COVID college student, so it was
Oh, yeah.
challenging. And I lived 40 minutes away from campus, but when I was there and I did have the opportunity, I did write for our student newspaper called Eagle News. And so I did have the opportunity to write many stories on, the student veterans on campus, what they were doing, because unless you're part of the military community, I feel like you hear Student Veteran Association, you're like, what is that? I mean, it's pretty much it's in the name, right? But it's still, you never really hear about it until, you do the research or you become a part of it yourself.
That's so funny that you say that, because that's kind of how I found out about it too. Being a
Oh,
communications
cool.
marketing
Yeah.
person, I was in a journalism class and we had to do like a documentary thing. And I was like, why don't I cover the Student Veterans Club?
Yeah.
Trying to just find a unique angle that I didn't think anyone else would cover.
Right.
And then I was like, these are my people. They understand what I'm trying to say. So,
They
yeah,
understand
but
that I say I'm from Germany, but I'm not from Germany.
yeah, or like even just funny things. Like I had been on base for so long, like living on base, living around base, that
Right.
I would call the campus security was called DPS, Department of Public Safety, and I would call them the MPs on accident and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So yeah. But it is kind of funny too, because I found I work in the veteran space now, and I've actually always worked in the veteran military community. That connection at Syracuse University with the Student Veterans Clubs is what like helped me get my foot in the door and a first job out of college. And so I think there's like really a space for military children in the veteran community. And I feel like not all of us really know that right off the bat.
Right.
But I think it's something we should talk about more, how like even if you are disconnected from the military, but you grew up that way, you can still be connected to the military community through organizations like Team
Yeah.
RWB, where I work now.
Right. Because I think, for me, that transition from military child to like veteran child, I still call myself a military child, but that veteran, role of it. And so that happened for me at a very young age. I was 12. And so I didn't necessarily understand, I understood that my dad was injured and that he could no longer serve. That was a no brainer. I was, confused, shocked. I don't know what necessarily the right word is of how I was feeling at that time. But when he was saying, I want to stay in the military, I was like, okay, like, I don't know how an amputee stays in the military, but they were going to make it work. And so, there was that, but then, that transition to retired life is so different, and not being around a military community, like 2 hours away from the closest base, from MacDill Air Force Base, like that is just, it's huge because you don't necessarily have that military community that far away.
Yeah. So did you kind of feel the same, like you had a transition, even though maybe it was like at a little bit of a younger age?
Yes. Oh my gosh. My parents will say I was the meanest person for 3 years trying to get into a new lifestyle, into a new environment. And I was like, I miss the military lifestyle. I miss my friends. I miss, living on base. I miss all of this stuff because, like I said earlier, my dad was reserved. So we didn't necessarily have the, on base experience for so long.
Oh, yeah.
And so finally getting that and having to let it go. Oh my gosh. My mom, like, I resented my parents for so long. And, looking back, it was like, okay, that was not fully necessary, but that was the only way I knew how to cope with it. I was like, I don't know how to let this lifestyle go.
Yeah, I mean, and you're also 12, so
Right. Going through
those are big
emotions.
things. Yeah, those are like really heavy topics and emotions and transitions that you're not equipped for as a 12-year-old, but you made it through. And, I think sometimes you can look back and find ways that you've grown even through all those challenges too.
Yeah, exactly. And like, being a, 22-year-old now, it's like trying to find, because like you, I feel like most connected to the military community. So
Yeah.
like I'm very grateful for this podcast that I started and growing that and being able to be connected to the military that way. But, my dream is to like work for a veteran military related nonprofit and be able to support the military community in that way. Just because that's where I feel home. That's my people. So I think it's fun to see other military kids who feel the same exact way. And even though you're still living the lifestyle as a spouse, you've still taken, the life you've had and not necessarily just thrown it away and, have turned it into something good for other people.
Yeah, that's like one of the greatest parts about being able to work in the military community and like nonprofit life. Nonprofit is it can be different at times. It's a lot.
Right.
You have to be scrappier and work through things in a way that I think in a corporate world you wouldn't. But it's so rewarding to know you're actually doing something good with all that time that you're putting in, and you're helping people, who kind of had similar experiences to you. So I wouldn't trade it any other way. I'm not sure if I'll ever leave the veteran military community. I've been here 10 years doing this stuff, but I love it. I love where I'm at. And yeah, it's just really, really rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last thing I want to ask you is what piece of advice you would give to another military child?
Yeah, so I think, okay, so this might be a little bit long-winded, but I think I would say it's okay to recognize that these things are difficult. It's like lean into it, know that it's hard, but also know that it's going to get better and you're going to become stronger through whatever whatever you face. So I think like if I had any advice, it's just like acknowledge it, work through it, talk to your friends, talk to your family, do whatever you need to get through those times that feel difficult, but always know that it's going to change and it can get better and you will be stronger through it. So I think that's kind of been my little mantra through everything. And I use it still today because I can look back and be like, you've made it through all your hardest days. So no matter what is thrown at you, you can do it more. So I would just encourage them to, like keep their chin up and know there's always other people out there like you or me that they could reach out to and would be happy to kind of mentor them or help them through it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then since you work for Team RWB, like where can people get connected with them? And like, I know we're like at the end of the episode, but like what is Team RWB?
Yeah, sure. So Team RWB is a health and wellness community for veterans. So what that means is we offer events, they're in person and in our app. And then we also offer training and programs that ultimately help veterans build a healthier lifestyle. They work out a lot in the military, but then when they get out, they can sometimes face challenges, getting back on that like fitness train. So we're really here just to support them, physical health, mental health, and community connection that maybe they lost during that time. And anyone can join. That's the beauty of it. So you could join as a military child. Regular civilians are welcome to join too. Service members who are currently in can also be part of it. You just go to teamrwb.org and sign up, and it's free. And veterans and service members also get a free shirt, one of these. So yeah.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for sharing your journey as a military child into military spouse on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me again. It's always fun to be able to kind of tell that side of myself. I don't get the opportunity very often. So really grateful for you and all that you're doing. I think this is huge and our community really needs it. And it's important to hear the stories of our military kids.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I can't agree more.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a like, follow, and comment. Also, be sure to check out Instagram and Facebook at Grace of a Military Child in Life for more awesome content. For information on the podcast, Military Child Bigs and Littles, Go AMCL blog, or other resources, visit www.goamcl.org. You can also email me at Gracie, that's GRACIE @GOAMCL.org with any questions or comments. To be a guest on the podcast, you can schedule it at www.goamcl.org/schedule a podcast, all one word, or contact me via social media or email. Stay tuned for the next episode where another incredible story is shared.